All right, hello. This is lesson Unit 6, Day 2. Let's go over the learning target. It is, I can find constant rate of change in proportions. This idea of constant rate or proportions, we will discuss quite a bit. So if it doesn't make sense now, that's okay. Two quantities are proportional if the ratio between the quantities is equal. Right now that might not mean a whole lot to you, but we'll take a look at this table and talk about how the ratios between the quantities are equal, and this creates a proportional graph. So here's our example problem. Mario travels 180 miles in 2.5 hours. If Mario travels at the same rate, how far can Mario travel in 5 hours? How far will he be able to travel right here? Let's take a look at what they did on the top row of our chart. To go from 2.5 hours to 5 hours, they just doubled it, or they added 2.5. And to go from 5 hours to 7.5 hours, they're just adding 2.5 hours. And the same thing all the way across. From 10 to 12.5 hours, they're just adding 2.5 hours. And what you'll see here is a pattern. So because there's a pattern on the top, that means for the miles, if Mario is traveling 2.5 hours, and he's going 180 miles, that means in 5 hours, his mileage, he'll just add another 180 to it. I just did that wrong. You'll add 180 to 180. And if you do that, you'll get 360. And we're just going to keep adding 180 each time. So plus 180. Let's plus 180 again. If you do that, you'll get 540. And then if you add 180 again, you'll get 720. And then 900. So the question along the bottom is, how many miles does Mario travel in 1 hour? Explain your solution. We just want to know how many miles he can travel in 1 hour. Right now we know that he travels 180 miles in 2.5 hours. We also know he travels 720 miles in 10 hours. We just want to know how many miles he travels in 1 hour. So here's how you can do it. You take the bottom number on our table and you're going to divide it by the top number. So you could do 180 divided by 2.5, and if you do that, you're going to get 72. What this means is Mario traveled 72 miles in 1 hour. You could also do any other number here. You could do 900 divided by 12.5. And what you'll see is you'll still get that he traveled 72 miles in 1 hour. So that's pretty cool. What this means right here is that because for each one of these rates, like 180 divided by 2.5, if you do that, you'll get 72. If you do 360 divided by 5, you'll get 72. If you do 540 divided by 7.5, you'll still get 72. So 72 is our constant. There's an idea that if you understand this right here in your notes, you will definitely understand your homework. So here it is. This equation, you're probably going to want to write it down, highlight it, put a star by it. Our constant is represented by the letter K. Our constant is equal to our y value divided by our x value. So anytime you see a table or a chart, the very first piece of information that's listed will always be your x value, and the next piece of information listed will always be your y value. So with our equation that we have, K is our constant. And if on your homework it says find the constant, you know you're going to do this equation. y divided by x. And that's exactly what we did to figure out how many miles Mario travels in 1 hour. Let's move on and take a look at another problem. So the idea of finding the constant is represented by an equation, the equation that we just barely talked about, and you're going to need to know it. Here it is. Our constant is equal to our y value divided by x. And just like this bullet point up here, the constant is the value of the ratio of two proportional quantities. So just like in the screen before, when our quantities are going up by the same amount each time, our ratio is proportional. So let's take a look at this table below here. What you'll see, it says, examine the table below, describe the patterns that are true. We see feet. For every 1 foot, there's 12 inches. For every 2 feet, there's 24 inches. And so on and so on. So they listed the first column as x and the second column as y. The first question, part A, says, how do you know that the number of feet is proportional to the number of inches? Well, we don't know yet until we do some math, so here we go. This empty column right here actually tells you exactly what to do. It says do y divided by x, and that will give us our constant. Let's write out that equation that we have. Our constant, or k, is equal to y divided by x. So let's do that. Our y value in this case is 12, and our x value is 1. So let's do that. 12 divided by 1 gives us 12. The next one, 24 divided by 2. That will also give you 12. 36 divided by 3 gives you 12. What we're seeing here is a pattern. Every single time we seem to be getting the constant of 12. So we can assume that 12 is our constant. So for part A, how do you know that the number of feet is proportional to the number of inches? Well, we keep getting the same value for y divided by x. Part B says, using x, the number of feet, how do you find y, the number of inches? What that is asking us is basically, let's say it's asking us, okay, you have 7 feet. How do you figure out how many inches that's going to be? How do you figure out this number right here? Well, our constant is 12 every time. And all you have to do is multiply your x value by your constant to get your y value. So 7 times our constant, which is 12, will give us our answer. So for part B, it's saying, by using x, the number of feet, how do you find y in the number of inches? Well, you just have to multiply the number of feet by 12. Or by the constant. All right, let's move on to the next slide. So up here at the top, you'll notice that there's a key. Y always represents the y value. K, we've talked about this before. K represents the constant. I don't know why they spelled it with a K. And I get that question all the time, so I should find out. X is always represented by the x value, or x represents the x value. Okay, so for this question right here, apply your understanding of the constant of proportionality to the questions below. It's just saying, use what you know about what the constant is. And let's answer these questions. While training for a marathon, Keith's watch reported how many calories he burned at each mile marker, and the data is shown below. So Keith ran 1 mile and he burned 117 calories. Then he ran 2 miles and he burned 234 calories. 3 miles he burned 351 calories. My question for you, is he burning the same amount of calories each time? Let's find out. 117 plus 117, do you get 234? And the answer to that is yes, if you just add 117. If it is true that you just add 117 each time, then this could be a proportional graph. And it turns out this is a proportional graph because each one of these is just going up by the same value each time. To go from 3 to 4, you add 1. To go from 4 to 5, you add 1. So you'll notice on the top row, we're going up by the same number each time. And on the bottom row, we are also going up by the same number each time. So this graph is proportional, or this table. So when it says on part A, is the number of calories proportional to the number of miles? Let's put yes, because for every mile Keith runs, he burns 117 calories. And I'm just going to abbreviate that. When we're looking at our table, it's important to remember that every single time how we label this X and Y, the top value is going to be your X's, the bottom values are going to be your Y's. So use this when you go to write out any sort of equation or to find your constant. For part B, the question says the next day Keith ran 7.5 miles. That would be like over here, 7.5. How many calories did he burn? That's what we want to know. And in order to get that, what should we do? Well, if you notice on all of these other things, we haven't really talked about it, but to go from your X value to your Y value, you're going to multiply your X value by 117, by your constant. Same thing with this one right here, for 3 miles. If you multiply 3 miles by his constant calories burned, which is 117, you will get 351. So for 7.5, let's try multiplying our X value by our constant of 117. Let's do 7.5 times our constant of 117, and we will get the amount of calories that he burned, which is 877.5 calories. So what is the constant of proportionality? That just means what's the constant that we're given. And we find out that Keith is burning 117 calories each time. So 117 is equal to K, our constant. Part D says write an equation to explain the relationship between the number of miles and the calories burned. We talked about this just barely, a little bit. In order to figure out the relationship, you're going to take your X value and you're going to multiply it by 117, and that will give you your Y value. All right, so use the information below to determine the constant of proportionality in each situation. And what this means is use the information below and just find the constant. So here we go. If you're looking at these graphs right here, the first column will always be X and the second will always be Y on all of these. So cups of oil to cups of water. Let's go ahead and figure out what the constant is going to be. The third column actually gives us a hint right here. It says do Y divided by X. So let's do that. Our Y value of 6 divided by our X value of 1.5. And you will get 4. Let's do the next one. 16 divided by 4, and you'll get 4. 22 divided by 5.5, turns out you get 4. Same thing with the last one. It's important that you don't just jump down and conclude that all of these ratios are going to give you the same constant or give you a constant, because sometimes it won't. So you want to make sure that you go through and do the math for every single one of them. K represents our constant and we're constantly getting 4. That's our constant each time when we do our y value divided by our x value. So let's just go ahead and put 4 right there. On our next table, it says hours to miles walked. And then it gives us a hint. It even tells us what to do. It says do the y value divided by the x. So let's do 3 divided by 2. And if you do that, you will get 1.5. Let's do 6 divided by 4. And you'll get 1.5. 9 divided by 6. And you also get 1.5. 12 divided by 8. You also get 1.5 as your constant. And the very last table, let's do 36 divided by 3, and you will get 12. Let's do 60 divided by 5, and you will get 12. 72 divided by 6 gives you 12, and 96 divided by 8 also gives you 12. So our constant will be 12. All right, and this is the homework ticket. If you wanted to look at this, here's what it is. There's multiple ways that you can arrive to the conclusion of what x is going to be. All I want you to do is figure out what x is. You obviously don't need to do this to get your homework because you probably have it already, but you can look at this a couple different ways. You can say, okay, I'm seeing here that to go from 3 to 6, we are adding 3. And to go from 6 to 9, we are adding 3. So the left side, or our x values, are going up by the same number each time. And with our y values, if they go up by the same number each time, we know that this is proportional. So I can figure out what my x value is. To go from 7.5 to 15, you're going to add 7.5. So let's go ahead and do the same thing for the last one. Let's add 7.5 to 15, and you'll get 22.5. Another way that you could do this is if you wanted to find what the constant is first. So what we would do in order to find the constant is we take our y value first and we divide it by our x value. We go back and draw those in. Here's our x values, here's our y values. To get your constant, you do your y value divided by your x value. So if we did that, we would do 7.5 divided by 3. And we would end up getting, let me do this really quick, I believe it's 2.5. Yeah, it is 2.5 is our constant. Same thing if you did 15 divided by 6. 2.5 would be your constant. Now in order to get from 9 to x, you have to multiply your x or your x value or your 9. You would have to multiply it by 2.5. Because that's what we did here. 6 times 2.5 gives you 15. And 3 times 2.5 gives you 7.5. So that means 9 times 2.5 will give us our answer, which is 22.5 once again. And that's it for today. If you have any questions, please come talk.